Good morning. Thanks for coming. Hope you all are caffeinated and ready for our Friday morning panel. I'm delighted to be here. I'm Paul Glastris, Editor-in-Chief of the Washington Monthly and a Schwartz Fellow here at New America. We're here today to discuss an article in the current issue of the Washington Monthly by Jamie Merisotis and Stan Jones called Degrees of Speed. And the concept here is, this is about both the unemployment situation, the job situation, and our higher education system, and where the two intersect. Today, President Obama is out in Ohio talking about the 10,000th project that's been funded by the stimulus package and trying to stimulate some support for a much reduced, ever-shrinking new stimulus measure. The Congress doesn't seem to have the votes to do much of anything more on the jobs front now that deficit reduction has taken hold. Meanwhile, we heard some not terribly good news on the job creation front a couple of weeks ago. The Department of Labor said only 40,000 jobs were created last month. So for the 15 million unemployed in this country, it's a little bit dispiriting. And there's a sense in Washington of what can Washington do to help. Think about it this way. Even if we could double, triple, quadruple the number of jobs being created, and I think there's a general sense that jobs are slowly but surely being created and will be created. Even if we did that, most of those losing their jobs or who have lost their jobs aren't trained to do most of the jobs that are and will be being created. So what Jamie and Stan brought to the Washington Monthly was a fascinating idea about how to solve this problem, how to turn the institutions of that are available to train the unemployed, to give them the quick degrees that they need to get back out in the workforce and earn their keep, how to turn them into higher performing institutions. So I'm going to let them, we have a great panel here, and I'm just going to turn it over to them. Let me first introduce the panel. Jamie Merisotis is President and CEO of the Lumina Foundation for Education, the nation's largest private foundation committed solely to enrolling and graduating more students from college. He also founded and was president of the Institute of Higher Education Policy here in Washington and served as executive director of the National Commission on Responsibilities for Financing Post-Secondary Education, a bipartisan commission appointed by the President and Congress. He's written for the Washington Post, Times Higher Ed, Chronicle of Higher Education, and other publications, and I'm proud to say got his start with me many years ago as interns at the Washington Monthly, so we go back a long ways. Stan Jones is founder and president of Complete College America, a national nonprofit working to significantly increase the number of Americans with college degree or credentials of value and to close the attainment gap for traditionally underrepresented populations. Stan was formerly Indiana's Commissioner of Higher Education, was a senior advisor to Governor Evan Bayh, and a state legislator. Carol Puryear is director of the Tennessee Technology Center at Murfreesboro, Tennessee. You're going to be hearing a lot about the Tennessee Technology Center today. It is one of 27 state-of-the-art technical training and diploma granting facilities in the state. Prior to that, she was the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Instruction for the entire Tennessee technology system and also launched the state's online degree program for the Board of Regents system. Finally, we have very honored to have James Quall with us. James is an old friend, a senior advisor, and soon-to-be Deputy Undersecretary of Education, and until recently a special assistant to President Obama at the White House National Economic Council, where he was a driving force behind the administration's American Graduation Initiative. He was also a policy advisor to President Bill Clinton, served on the staffs of Congressman George Miller, Senator John Edwards, and worked at the Center for American Progress and the Institute for College Access and Success. So we've got more higher education brain power concentrated in one place than I've ever seen. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie Merisotis.
Thanks very much, Paul. I'm delighted to be here, and I have to say, after more than 2 decades in Washington, D.C., before I went to the Foundation 3 years ago, I'm not sure I heard very many times that my ideas were fascinating, so I'm really thrilled to hear that description. I'd like to seize this moment and capture it for posterity. Look, no one wants a jobless economic recovery. In fact, full economic recovery isn't going to be possible until thousands of Americans return to work in jobs that are going to pay a living wage. So putting people back to work isn't just a benefit of economic recovery, it's really an absolutely essential strategy for putting the nation back on the road to economic recovery. But as Paul pointed out, jobs have changed a lot, and along with them the skills and the knowledge that's required to enter and be successful in our workforce. In the knowledge-based economy, more and more jobs are going to require the skills and the knowledge obtained in a post-secondary education institution. Because of the phenomena that we've heard a lot about in the last year, about structural job loss, recessions only accelerate what is clearly this longer-term trend. The current recession has eliminated millions of jobs, most of them low-skills jobs, that won't be coming back when the recession ends. They'll be replaced by higher skills jobs that are going to require workers to have more education and training, and our ability to be able to provide the skills training and knowledge and experiences required to educate those hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of both displaced and new workers will be a major factor in how well and how quickly we can recover from this economy, from this economic crisis. So the evidence, I think, for this shift that we're seeing in labor markets lies in wages and employment. If you look at the data, you'll see that not only do college graduates earn more than those who don't complete college, but the gap is widening even as we've seen the supply of college graduates actually increasing in our society over the last few decades. Likewise, while new graduates are finding it harder to land jobs in this economic storm, our colleague from the Georgetown Center on Education and the Workforce, Tony Carnevale, likes to say a college degree is still the best umbrella in that economic storm. Because while unemployment rates for college graduates are higher than they've been in the past, they were almost 5% at their peak last fall. The unemployment rates for those with a high school degree was twice that, and for those with less than a high school credential was 3 times that rate. So all of this, I think, is clear evidence that the U.S. is undersupplied with college graduates. Producing more college graduates has become critical to the economy, and completing college, actually getting through the programs, has become an essential prerequisite to individual success. This is one reason why the Lumina Foundation, why President Obama, why many have now stepped forward to commit to this national goal of increasing college degree attainment to 60%, because our economy absolutely requires it. Well, I think federal policy is going to need to encourage and support the role of post-secondary education system in meeting our nation's workforce needs. Job training and workforce development programs need to focus on higher education degree attainment whenever possible, and should move students toward the award of a credential that actually recognizes their knowledge and skills. Now, a major part of this national strategy, as our article points out, for putting Americans back to work in living wage jobs has to be to get more people into and through post-secondary programs very rapidly, especially those offering degrees and credentials linked to high-demand, high-wage occupations. I think there's 2 overarching factors that make this an absolute imperative. The first, which I already noted, is that the vast majority of the jobs currently being created require some form of post-secondary education. But I think the second factor is equally important, and that is individuals and families without jobs or without income require immediate relief, something that's been difficult for colleges and university programs to provide. Many of these programs, quite bluntly, simply take way too long to finish, and particularly for families already under financial pressure. Time is a major factor in the lives of many of these individuals both adults and traditional age students that forces them back into, if they can find them, low-wage, low-skills jobs that simply intensify the need for more and often costly education down the road. So, fortunately, our article points out, there is one potential solution among an array of solutions, we think, to this problem. Accelerated programs that allow students to achieve job-relevant post-secondary degrees and credentials in potentially a year or less have real value in this new economy. And in fact, as you'll hear, these kind of programs are not original. In fact, variants on this approach have been tested for quite some time. And we at Lumina Foundation, as well as some of our other philanthropic partners, are continuing to test even more of these models. We've found that the strongest of these programs require students to treat their education essentially as a job. That is, to be in a program for a fixed period of time with a block schedule. And Stan and Carol and ultimately James are going to talk more about how those programs work and also what the policy issues are, particularly in Stan and James's case, about how we might be able to do that through the $2 billion TAA community college program that was actually funded as part of the budget reconciliation. I think the way to think about these programs is this. When you're in one of these programs, you have a job, and your job is to get that post-secondary degree so that you can be successful in life and move on to a high-quality work experience. You know, from our perspective, we've invested hundreds of billions of dollars as a society in taxpayer dollars to ensure that banks and automobile manufacturers and others emerge from the recession on a sound footing. From our vantage point, the unemployed now represent a major long-term challenge for the country, and we think it's important for us to invest what would really only be a tiny fraction of the amounts that we've already invested in those other industries in the future of the workers who are the backbone of our economy. Giving unemployed Americans the opportunity to quickly upgrade their skills in high-demand job fields and get back to supporting their families with middle-class wages, we think is not only a reasonable and appropriate goal for the country, it's absolutely essential. So let me turn it over to Stan, who's going to talk a little bit more about the ideas that are contained in our piece, as well as some of the policy context. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jamie. I guess I want to start by really with the President, who really has set out some pretty ambitious and overarching goals for the country. We've slipped to 10th in the country in terms of the young adults that have post-secondary degrees, and he's, by 2025, challenged the country to close that gap, which would mean substantially more degrees, both associate level, certificates, and bachelor's, but also to close the gap for underrepresented populations, and to provide every young person with an opportunity for at least 1 year of college. As we embark on this pretty substantial task, that is very, works very closely with the Lumina Foundation objective of having 6 out of every 10 adults in the country have a college degree. These are ambitious goals. And so how do we start, or how are we doing at the beginning? This country today has record enrollment in higher education. More people are going to college than ever have before, and we're seeing at community colleges 15 and 20% increases. And many of these people are without the money to go to college and putting down money for tuition they don't have, and incurring debt they're not quite sure how they're going to pay for, and committing time away from their families and away from their jobs. So we might ask, well, so how does this, and so many of us who have spent a lot of our lives talking about the importance of higher education, and that you will make $1 million more with a bachelor's degree, people have bought that. And so I feel somewhat responsible. I think you should feel responsible that people believe that. And that's to them, as they define the American dream, that's part of how they define it. Unfortunately, for all too many, that's not going to be the case. By the time graduation rolls around, the class won't be nearly as diverse as it was starting, and only half of the students, or less than half, will graduate that started. And if you went to a community college, it's more like 60 to 65% will not graduate. The graduation rates, for example, for four-year unselected admission colleges generally run 30%, 35% after 6 years. I think we're going to rename them 6-year universities rather than 4-year universities. And community colleges aren't any better. The 2-year graduation rate for full-time students is about 10 to 12%. The 3-year graduation rate is about 25%. And so many who started just will never achieve that dream. And so typically what happens, and if you read in the papers about why these things happen, then the excuses say, well, what would you expect? These people are going part-time, they're adults, they weren't prepared in high school, they're raising families, they have jobs. And those are reasons, but they cannot be excuses. And those are the reasons that actually get in our way of really dealing effectively with this. I think the biggest issue is really how we educate the people that are coming back. And we built a system for hundreds of years that is really designed for a very different kind of student. Students that are right out of high school, that came out of a college prep curriculum, that go 4 years, that live on campus, lived in the dorm, have middle class parents, have the resources to go, have the resources to study abroad. Those are not the students we're talking about, and yet we are trying to fit them into the same kind of system. And I want to talk briefly about 3 strategies which I think we have backwards, completely backwards. One is we think time helps, that we say, oh, if they had more time, they would complete. And the evidence is overwhelming. If they have more time, they're not going to complete. The federal government just reported for the first time that the 6-year graduation rate for full-time students going to a 4-year university is 55%, and the 8-year graduation rate is 58%. And so that additional 2 years earned us an additional 3%. If you're still there after 6 years, the chances are better you're not going to graduate than if you are. Some people call that not achieving the dream, but living the dream, because you're still in college. And also we know people talk about life gets in the way, and especially community colleges, and people have situations happen in their lives. Jobs change, families change. Over 40% of the people attending community colleges have families. Over 70% have jobs. And so life gets in the way of this strategy. The second point I want to make is about choice, is that we're Americans, we believe people need choice, and lots of choices. And so some of the way we deal with this is we say students need lots of choices. And the fact of the matter is choices turn out to be bad choices for many students. The ratio of counselors to students on community college campus is about 1 to 1,000. Half the students show up in August to sign up. Do you think those students get counseled? Of course they don't. Even if we doubled the number of counselors, they still wouldn't get counseling. And so they're making uninformed choices. And there's evidence, research done outside of education and inside of education that directed choices are much more effective, or a limited number of choices are much more effective for students, and that's why you hear talk about core curriculum. I was an engineering student, and I don't remember having a choice until I was a junior in college. People say that people that were in pre-med, they didn't have a choice either. It was pretty much of a lockstep curriculum. And so there's nothing wrong with, I think, directed choice. The third point I want to make is probably the hardest. Again, it's the way we've structured the delivery system, is to structure it differently. And for example, what this really needs is more of an organized strategy to move people through the system in an effective way. And so there are examples, there aren't many, but there are examples where programs that are structured, block scheduling, for example, cohort-based programs that are integrated are far more effective. And just to point out 3, the SAP program in CUNY, they offer, for their freshman programs, they offer an 8 to 12 block, a 1 to 5 block, and a 6 to 10 block. And they have doubled the numbers of students, tripled the numbers of students that graduate in 2 years, and doubled the numbers of students that graduate in 3 years. Another is a program that Lumina funded that's just starting in Indiana that is the one-year accelerated associate degree program that Jamie talked about. And so the idea is you start, you get your remediation either in the summer before in high school, and in the course of a year, because you're going 8 to 2, you can complete your associate degree and be in the job market. And the third we're going to hear from Carol about, which is the Tennessee Tech Centers, and I call it kind of back to the future. They didn't invent this yesterday. They've been doing this for 20 years, and some of the rest of us kind of discovered it, that they were on the right track for 20 years. And it's block scheduled, cohort-based, it's integrated, highly effective. What we need is to take some of these very impressive programs and the features that Jamie talked about in terms of acceleration for time and for choice and structure, and scale it pretty dramatically for this country. And James is here with a great opportunity. He's got $2 billion to help direct for this country as part of a community college initiative, as a part of an initiative to put people back to work, as part of an initiative to meet the President's objectives. And Jamie and I think that there's an opportunity here that where this accelerated degree concept that can be highly effective, that has evidence behind it, can really kind of spread its wings with this kind of an opportunity. So we have an opportunity here, I think, to start to change lots of people's opportunities to graduate and have them realize that dream. So Carol, why don't you tell us what you've been doing for a long time?
Good morning. I am Carol Pereira, and I work with the Tennessee Technology Center at Murfreesboro, and that's just one of 27 technology centers across the state, and we are part of the Tennessee Board of Regents that has 6 universities, 13 community colleges, and then the technology centers. So for the first few minutes, I'm going to just give you the overview of how things are in Tennessee as far as what the technology centers do, and then I would like to share with you some of the things that Jamie and Stan have mentioned. We have been doing the same thing over and over again, and luckily it is working for us and helping students complete their education as well as find a job in their field. The technology centers originated in the state of Tennessee as part of the State Department of Education, and they began in the early 60s as area vocational centers. They served primarily high school students, and then later as time moved on, we began serving more adult students and more adult students, and in 1983 we were moved under the Tennessee Board of Regents, which is the 7th largest public higher education system in the nation. And in the state of Tennessee, you have what we in Tennessee call the Orange Schools, or University of Tennessee, and then we have the other institutions. But that's as far as I'll say about that. But in 1994, our institutions changed their names. They became the technology centers as opposed to the area vocational schools. Throughout our history, we have really been doing the same thing over and over again. We're competency-based, open entry, open exit, and our mission is very simple. Our mission is to help you find a job. And basically that's what we try to do every single day. And I can tell you from being both at the state level and on a campus level, we really do a little bit more than that. We change lives. We have people that come into our facility. Their whole life had been planned. They were working in a factory. They were working in whatever field and thought they would do that forever. And now that field is gone. So they've not only lost their job, they've lost their career and everything that goes along with that. And we have the privilege to work with those folks and help to turn them around and teach them that life's not over when they got that pink slip. So that's a wonderful thing that we get to do on a day-to-day basis. Our average age student is around 32, and that will vary from institution to institution. As I said, there are 27 centers all the way from Memphis, Tennessee to Elizabethton, Tennessee. And there is a school within about 30 miles of every Tennessean. So access is really not a problem necessarily because we're pretty close. We are accredited by the Council on Occupational Education, which is a national accrediting agency. We're clock hour based, which makes us a little different. We're the only system in the state that does operate under clock hours, and we award certificates and diplomas. Our calendars are a little different too. You're familiar with semesters and quarters. Well, the technology centers are on trimesters, which means we have 3 equal terms every 72 days. So we start students in January, May, and September. And I really, as you'll hear in just a second, think that's one of the reasons why the program works as well as it does. And so I'm just going to share with you some of the things that we're doing that I think are helping our students complete. The first thing is the program structure. By having a calendar that's every 72 days, students do not have a long period of time to say, "Ooh, maybe I won't go back. Maybe I'll take this semester off. Maybe I'll take this term off." They're expected to go those 72 days. Every term they sign up and come back. We offer very specific programs. As Stan mentioned, choices are wonderful. You know, we can go to McDonald's and have lots of choices to make just for lunch. Well, at the Technology Center, you really don't get to have it your way at a Burger King. We really limit that. You choose your program, you choose if you want to be full-time or part-time, and in some cases you can choose if you want to go day classes or night classes, depending on the program. We offer about 55 occupational programs across the state. All the centers operate programs based on their local industry and what their community needs. The programs have one teacher generally that works with their students. In some of our health programs, you'll have a couple of teachers. They're open entry, open exit, which means we register. Some schools register weekly, some register once a month, some register twice a term. But when we have openings and we have students who want to go to school, then we will enroll you and have you start. By open exit, we're competency based. So when you meet those competencies and that proficiency in that particular area, then you can graduate and you can leave. If it's in the middle of July, we don't hold you to August. You can go ahead and exit. Our class sizes are small, 1 to about 20 to 22, so there's a lot of hand-holding and being right there with you. You learn a lot about a person when you spend a lot of time with them. Full-time students at a technology center will go 30 hours a week. That's 6 hours a day for 5 days. And sometimes that's where I have students that kind of their eyes get really, "You want me to come every day? You want me to be here every morning at 7:45? And I say, "Yes, that's what I need you to do." Because as they mentioned earlier, we really are preparing people to go to work. And I don't know how your job situation is, but I have to show up every day. And if my boss is listening, I hope he knows that I do show up every day. But attendance is required. Most of our programs, in fact, all of our programs that are non-allied health programs are self-paced, meaning you will move as fast as you can. You may need a little help in theory in a particular area. It may take you longer to get engine performance if you're studying automotive than maybe brakes. You move at your own pace. So that's important to kind of keep in mind as well. It's a huge commitment for students because think about it, 30 hours a week, every week, until you get through the program. Our shortest program is truck driving, and it's about a 7-week program. Your longest program is going to be in your automotive program, which is about 18 to 22 months. And so students make a huge commitment. I have a student on our campus in Murfreesboro. He has not had a paycheck in 2 years. He made the commitment and he's a father of 3 small children. His wife went back to work so he could come to school. He lives on $20 a week. Now that's pretty hard for people to imagine unless you're looking at this particular student. But for $20 a week, he pays his gas, and that man has eaten more ramen noodles than I've ever seen. I think he's going to turn into one when he leaves the program. But they make those sacrifices because there's an exact end to the site. They see it. They do not sign up for classes. They sign up for a program. So when they sign up for a program, they will go through their study. They don't pick and choose. They have a set program of study that they go through. The emphasis is placed on quality of our programs. Our faculty come out of industry and work with their students. Also, we have senior students that try to work with the younger students or the newer students as they come through. Another strong point is to keep in mind that we have a technology foundation program. Those of us that have been in education forever, we've heard of remedial and developmental. Our tech foundations is really not what I would call remedial and developmental, except in some ways I guess you could say it is. But the difference is it's a co-requisite. Our students come to school, they take their regular program, and then maybe an hour to an hour and a half, once or twice a week, they may go down to the Tech Foundation's lab, brush up on their math skills, their reading skills, their comprehension skills. It's part of their program. It's just what they all do. They all get up, they all leave. Again, it's self-paced. When they finish that program, they don't have to go back to Tech Foundations anymore. But it's very much a part of their program area. If they're a machining student, they'll be studying machining problems. They have no idea they're doing trigonometry. I'm here to tell you right now, they have no idea that's what they're doing, but that's what they're doing. But because it's incorporated in such a way into their program in the Tech Foundations, it really helps them learn, and they can see the importance of it. All students are assessed after they're enrolled, and they take a test, they see where they are, and they know where they have to go to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to. We concentrate on reading for information, applied mathematics, and locating information. That's for all of the programs. Some of the programs also have listening, communication, and team building skills. The other part that's very important to keep in mind is that we're very student-centered. We solve anything from just, how do I get enrolled, to where am I going to go? I've been thrown out of my home. We work with all parts of the student's life. We're small and we can do that, but we're very student service and student oriented. And I think that's really important to remember as students come back. And I'm wrapping up just to say that there's just a lot of unique things that we do, but we do that every single day. And I think that is one reason why our completion rates and placement rates are as high as they are right now.
Tell them what they are.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I guess I should tell you that, shouldn't I? Okay, our completion rates are running about 83%, and our placement rate is running about 75%. And that is placed in their field. So a drafter is placed in drafting, a machinist or an automotive, they're placed in their area. And that is part of what our accreditation agency requires us to do. Okay, thank you.
Let me just quickly outline the policy proposals that we have listed in the article, and then we'll hear from Deputy Undersecretary Quall about the administration's view of this approach broadly. I mentioned the first one, which is that there's an opportunity with the $2 billion that was put into the budget reconciliation for the TAA Community College program. So we suggest that one thing the administration could do fairly easily is, in announcing how these grants will be distributed, to actually place a priority on programs that re-engineer their 1- and 2-year degrees to stress timely graduation, job placement, and tracking of the careers of those who graduate. So that's one element. Now there's a second element which is more complicated. We recognize that for this population, there is a specific issue that you've got to confront, which is that under the unemployment rules, it's difficult to go to college and actually meet the unemployment requirements because of the job search requirements under the unemployment rules. So this is something that's clearly got to be addressed at some point, and this is not something that should be insurmountable in terms of being able to address these concerns. The ability to implement this kind of a program where, in effect, your job is to get this post-secondary degree or credential, we think could have some policy resonance. The third is, what do you do about people who aren't unemployed but who clearly need to be connected to these kind of efforts? And here I think it's a more complicated road to get to these kind of programs, but one possibility would literally be to create an additional stipend beyond the eligibility for financial aid so that students reduce their need to work outside of school, and therefore they'll be able to participate in the block scheduling in the prescribed curriculum in a way that will help them get through much more quickly. We don't think that kind of a stipend would need to be all that substantial, frankly, but again, it would help these students essentially treat their educational experience like a job, and their job is to get that credential and get out and get into the workforce, into a high-demand job. So let me turn it over to Deputy Undersecretary Quall for his comments and thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today, both New America and Washington Monthly are organizations I think a lot of. They generate a lot of interesting ideas that you don't see other places. And Jamie and Stan and Carol, I think, are doing great work, and it's a pleasure to learn from their thoughts. I wanted to talk a little bit about one population that could benefit from this type of program that I think is very important to keep in mind. And then I wanted to mention a couple of things that the administration is doing to make it easier for adults, and especially unemployed adults, to get training programs of this kind and similar. The problem of the long-term unemployed, I think, is something that we really have to pay a lot of attention to, and it's something that a lot of the folks in administration are very concerned about. We have something like 7 million, close to 7 million people who've been unemployed for 6 months or longer. That's almost half of the unemployed, which is shattering all-time records for percent of the unemployed who've been unemployed for that long. And I think it's important to keep in mind the impact that it has on these individuals. There were some studies done of dislocated workers in the 1980s recession, which is not precisely the same group, but an analogous group. And even when they found work again, they often suffered an earnings loss of about 30%. And even 15 or 20 years later, they were earning about 20% less than they were in a job that they lost. And so I think there's a couple things to go into that. There's a stigma attached to being unemployed for long amounts of time. Skills degrade and work habits degrade. There may also be just an element of luck in finding a well-paid, stable job. And it's difficult to do that twice. And something else that I think is quite powerful is the impact it has on families. I don't know how many of you have read Don Peck's article in The Atlantic a couple months ago, but there's some sociological evidence about the impact on families, and especially men, who are often seen as the breadwinner in a cultural way, and the impact it has on their self-respect, their family's respect for them, the dissolution of their family. I think one very powerful statistic in that article is that calls to domestic abuse hotlines are up 50% from a year ago. So, very much the administration's goal is not just to get the economy moving again, but to try and use this time to build something that is better, so that when the economy is back on full steam, we're further ahead than we were when the recession started. And certainly that should be our goal. If you look at the track record of the 2000s expansion, you had virtually no job growth. Over the course of that decade, you had median incomes flat. So we need not just to have the economy moving again, which thankfully it is, and jobs are being created, but our goal needs to be to have a foundation for economic growth that's sustainable and that's shared. One important contributor to that would be to use this time to try and help people build their skills and get ahead, so that when the economy is, when the job market is back to where we all want it to be, workers have the skills they need. So that is a key part, and we've done a couple of things. First of all, the President has made very large investments in the Pell Grant Scholarship, which is the primary means of financing post-secondary education and training. It does go to a lot of these short-term training programs as well, which I think is something that people don't always realize. A year ago, Secretary Duncan took several steps to try and make the Pell Grant program more suited to unemployed workers. One of the problems that many unemployed workers had is income eligibility for the Pell Grant program is based on data that is often about 18 months old. It's the calendar year before the academic year that you enroll. So if you're a dislocated worker, an unemployed worker, you could be ineligible for a Pell Grant based upon income that you no longer earn. Secretary Duncan asked colleges to adjust the expected contribution and eligibility for students based upon their current economic circumstances, and they also asked them to overlook income from unemployment benefits, since those benefits are not large and are needed to support workers' lifestyle and their families. So that's something that we hope has enabled more workers who are unemployed to return to college and to finance some education and training. And we'll have some data on that later this summer, I hope. The department has also been working with the Department of Labor to train staffs at one-stops on Pell eligibility forms and with state workforce agencies to notify workers of this Pell eligibility. And over 40 states have sent a letter or some other kind of notification to unemployed workers to let them know that this training opportunity is available to them. The second set of things that the President has done is to look at the unemployment insurance program. And I think it's important to look at this program. It's not a Department of Education program, of course. It's at the Labor Department. And it really should be more than just a safety net. It should be a stepping stone. It should be an opportunity for workers to get the skills they need to get ahead. And it's often not, for a couple of reasons. Jamie mentioned the work search requirement, and for you to be eligible for unemployment insurance, you have to be actively looking for work and available for work. And there's an exception to that for training, which is required by federal law. But those policies are set by the state in terms of exactly what types of training are excluded or allowable, and many states interpret that quite narrowly. And then the second problem, of course, is just timing, where unemployment benefits typically are 26 weeks. They're longer now because of the economic downturn. So that doesn't sync up very well with the academic calendar. The President has done two things. First of all, the Recovery Act included the unemployment insurance modernization proposal, which was $7 billion for states who chose off of a menu of things to upgrade their unemployment insurance laws. And one of the things that states were encouraged to do was to provide an additional 26 weeks of unemployment insurance to workers who are engaged in training. The second thing he did was he wrote letters to states to ask them to expand their eligible training so that more workers would be considered to be actively looking for work even though they're enrolled in school. And state policies currently vary widely. Many allow training funded through the Workforce Investment Act, but when you get to longer types of training, degree-seeking programs, many states do not. There's a lot of inconsistency. That letter was sent last spring, and since then, about 20 states have revisited their policies in this area, which we think is very good, and there may be more to do here as well. And then the third thing, which Jamie and Stan have alluded to, is the President's Community College Initiative. I'm not actually giving out $2 billion personally, Stan. I think that may be why people have been so nice to me this morning. It's actually a Department of Labor program, but those of us at the Department of Education are working very hard, and I think we've done a good job working closely with the Labor Department in ways that haven't always happened in the past. The President is very, he focused on community colleges early on as a key driver of educational access and educational attainment. And Jamie and Stan mentioned the President's goal of being #1 in the world again in college degrees by 2020. Community colleges really are important institutions. They're democratic in a way because they are open admission. They welcome people of all academic backgrounds and levels. They have affordable tuitions, and they help people get to where they want to go, whether it is even just a hobby class to a certificate program, an associate's degree, transfer to four-year schools, English as a second language, GED programs. So they're really essential institutions. They enroll about 8 million people. It's about a 17% increase over the last 2 years. And moreover, the types of programs that they're training people for, types of jobs that they're training people for, are very important. The Council of Economic Advisors estimates that more than half the jobs that are going to be created over the next decade require an associate's degree or higher. So the student loan reform bill included $2 billion for community colleges. It wasn't everything we asked for, but we are actually quite pleased. It's important to keep in mind that money is coming sooner than than the president proposed. So although the dollar figure is not as large, it's over 4 years instead of over 10 years. And $2 billion is a significant sum of money that we think can make some important investments in community colleges. The president envisioned a couple of key areas to focus on with community colleges. Remediation and developmental education, including integrating it with the academic and vocational content of the courses, partnerships with businesses to make sure that the training programs are aligned to the needs of the local economy, partnerships with other educational institutions to make sure that high school graduates are ready for college level work, and to make sure that credits from community colleges transfer. And a focus on completion to help more students get across the finish line. And some of the best practices have been talked about today, where you talk about the cohort effect and block scheduling, more guidance in terms of what courses to take and what order to take them in. So we think there's a lot of potential for this funding. There's to fund programs like the ones that have been described today. We think there's a lot of merit in these ideas, and we hope that the Labor Department will get some good applications in this area. Our goal is to have that competition open up early this fall. So that's what we're working on, and I look forward to your questions.
James, thank you. Thank you to the entire panel. I'm going to start off with just a few questions to get the conversation going and to maybe pull some of the threads together. Carol, can you repeat what the graduation rates are for the 27 technology centers?
Yes, sir.
We have microphones on? Yeah, great.
The graduation rates for the 27 technology centers is running about 83 for the completion rate, and the placement rate's running around 75%.
Placement rate meaning job?
In their field, yes, sir. It's jobs.
Now, what do we know about that? There's two other ways. There's two ways that people get 1 and 2 year credentials. There's community colleges, and then there are the for-profit schools. Stan or Jamie, I don't have it off. What is the graduation rate again for community colleges?
The national average for full-time students is about 10 to 12% after 2 years and 25% after 3 years. Part-time students, it's about 10%.
So generously 25% graduation rate, although I think that
you can say 30 if you want.
30% versus 80%. And for-profit schools, it's higher than it is for community colleges. It's in the 40% range, right? I believe.
I don't know.
What is the cost of a training program of a year at the Tennessee Technology Centers?
Currently, the cost is $800 a trimester, and so it's roughly a year cost around $2,400, plus their books and supplies, which will vary from their program area.
So $2,500 per year, and with an 80% graduation rate. I just when you all, I'm asking obviously a rhetorical question because I know the answers here. When you guys brought me that fact, it just blew my mind that you have, this is not one school, this is not one sort of institution with a charismatic leader. This is a statewide system that's been doing this for 20, 30 years. So I just find that awfully enlightening and inspiring.
If I could say so, I mean, and there are people that know a lot more than I do about community colleges and certificate programs. Like, for example, from the Community College Resource Center, who would say these are exceptionally high graduation rates. You don't see these across the country, and clearly you don't see them at what we say scale, with in excess of 12,000 students at over 20 sites. You might find an isolated program, but even those are pretty rare.
Scalability is sort of the great issue in almost all policymaking. What have you, Stan and Jamie, found as you've looked into this are the possibilities for taking a model like the Tennessee Technology Centers and spreading it throughout the country? Is this something that's going to take decades? How do you do it?
No, I think the evidence is pretty clear that we recognize the tech centers are not associate degrees, and we're talking about a range of credentials that are required. But in fact, there are programs. Stan mentioned a couple of them where in fact they are for associate degrees, and we're experimenting with some now. I think the challenge is to move towards this block scheduling approach. And to in effect have the more prescribed curriculum. That requires some changes in some institutions of higher education. But what we've envisioned in some of these sort of offline conversations with college presidents, community college presidents, is that you've got a group that I think would be very willing to step into this, to actually create an approach as part of what they're already doing, to see how far they can get with this model. And the ones that we talked to said that they could do this very quickly. That is, they couldn't transform the entire institution in 6 months, but they could start building these kind of models pretty quickly and see how far they can go. And as Stan mentioned, we're actually testing that very idea with Ivy Tech Community College in Indiana right now as one example. So we think there's a lot of potential to get scale, to your point, fairly quickly with some early adopters that would be able to point the way towards being able to transform the learning process in a pretty rapid way. So this is not something that's going to require 3 to 5 more years of study and another $2 billion to get going. We think we can get this going and get the model moving towards getting tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people in place pretty quickly in a year or two.
Carol, before we got started today, you were telling me some individual stories of the kinds of people at Murfreesboro that you are educating. Tell us just a little bit about, because I think, some granular sense of what's going on in the economy out there is something we're all kind of interested in. And I think we're all have this sense, well, there's no jobs, there's nothing that can be done. But you were telling me some interesting stories about what kinds of degrees and certificates are offered at what has happened to the economy. Just elaborate a little bit about that.
In our particular area, we've
And
had,
you can talk in the microphone too, because there you go.
in our particular area, we've had several factories that have either closed completely or reduced their workforce, which is common across the country. We have several students who are actually in programs that they never thought they would be in. I was sharing a story earlier. We have a lady in her early 60s that's in our business systems technology program. She was working in a factory. That was going to be her life forever, and she was doing just fine. The factory closed. She came back for education, which that in itself is huge for someone just to come back to school, to have to retrain. She's now working in our business systems technology program, and honestly, it's been very difficult for her. She did not know what part of the computer to even begin to touch, but because of her desire and her determination, she's coming to school every single day. She almost beats me there some days, and she's working very hard. Will she make the same money that she made at the factory? She may not, but she will have a job with a living wage and able to be self-supporting. And she told me that she's going to make all her grandchildren come to the Technology Center at Murfreesboro, and that just made my day. These opportunities come, and people have to just change the way they're thinking to get a new job and get back in the workforce. We have folks in our surgical technology program that many some have associate degrees, some have some additional post-secondary training, but they're coming back to work in the medical field. And they will leave making, after a 1 year worth of training, they will make, a little $33,000 to $34,000 a year after 1 year. And placement rates are very good in those fields. And so you just see the life changing of people coming in who have worked for companies for years, and middle-aged folks coming in and just getting retrained. So it's a wonderful opportunity.
Great. Well, we've got a big crowd here, and I want to open it up to some questions from the audience. Paul here has a microphone, and I'd like you to state your name and your affiliation, if you like. So we can start this gentleman right here in the front row.
My name is Jeff Stroll. I'm with the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce. And it's sort of an open question to everyone. But first, I just want to express my great support for the ideas that you guys are putting forth, because from a labor economist viewpoint, having a shortened program enables flexibility that helps us coordinate with the fastly moving global economy. So as people move, the shorter is the time period, the better is them to link up. My question, which is to everyone, which is deals with scalability of the program. I want to ask a question to focus on three ideas. One is readiness. The second is resources, and then third is the linkages to the labor market. First, I'm wondering if your program, this is mostly to Carol, is the selection of the students who come in. It sounds as though they're either potentially more motivated than other students might be, or potentially have life experiences that help them understand. So how does that then deal with scalability issues on the readiness? The resource issues, I'm wondering, has there been any work that's been done to show that education dollar per outcome measure, which I think is a great selling point for this program. I think it's very good. And thirdly is the linkages to the labor market. We've seen early in the recession talk about, well, train them and there's going to be a job, and then somebody trains and you see the New York Times article that says, well, I went to school and there was no job. It sounds like you do have good placement, so I'm wondering if you have a purposeful program integrating with the local labor market demand, and if so, how do you guys scale that up? Where does that come in? Thank you.
I'll kind of answer those backwards. As far as working with the communities, the technology centers all have what we call advisory committees and craft committees. Those craft committees are people in our local industry that come and talk with our instructors and help us know what the curriculum should look like, what skills they actually need, and what the job placement rate's going to be, and where they're looking. They are probably our best source of information, and we work very closely with our Department of Labor in helping folks get in. With the technology centers, outside of our health programs, there are no admission requirements. Students can come in with a GED, without a GED. I've had folks come in with master's degrees. So we're pretty open admissions for folks to come in, and we just work with them where they are and get them where they need to be. But one of the keys is that we really do work with our industry in our area and evaluate our programs.
Because we've looked at a couple of these issues.
Stan, if you can talk to the microphone there.
In respect to cost, the total cost, including tuition, is approximately the same as if they went to a Tennessee community college. So they're not spending any more money. They're spending it differently in the sense they have more full-time faculty, but they've organized themselves differently. And as you probably can surmise from what Carol said, I mean, Carol, her faculty are not just faculty, they're also counselors, they're recruiters, you don't have to do the class scheduling, and so that they've restructured differently in terms of delivery, but it doesn't cost any more money. But a demographic analysis in terms of what kinds of students, and the students are actually poorer than those that go to the community colleges, which are not well off, and they're more diverse in terms of representation. Well, I think the only other argument you might make is that maybe they're more career-oriented, and there's probably some truth in that. But I might point out, because I think that one of the criticisms of these kinds of programs is that, well, the students don't get to discover, what is, well, for every one that's discovering, there's 4 that's wandering. There's not a whole lot of evidence that some of these students, by discovering, ended up in the right places. Right. As one of our friends said, quoting Yogi Berra, he said, if you don't have a major, you can't change it. And so many people just start out kind of wandering through the curriculum.
I wanted to pick up on what you said and pose a question to James, and that is, in terms of a system that would encourage community colleges to integrate with the labor markets, the local labor markets. My understanding of the technology centers is that there is some measure of that. You build in a measure of placement. You have placement rates based on some kind of, I don't know what the measure is, but you've got a measure. My understanding is with most community colleges, they have no such measure. And my question to James is, should we have a system where community colleges, where we meld graduation data with job placement data? Is that possible?
Yeah, it is possible. We should, and in fact, a lot of states are developing longitudinal data systems, which track students' progress through college and into the labor market. And it's something that the department is encouraging. We just gave out a round of grants about a month ago to about 24 states to help them develop these kinds of systems. So I think this is something there's actually a lot of interest in. Community colleges are unfortunately not a well-resourced group of institutions. I think the ambition and the interest is there. The workforce investment system has statewide and local workforce investment boards that do provide a forum for employers to work with community colleges and other training institutions to help to coordinate needs. In some places that works very well. In some places it doesn't work as well. So I think the data systems hopefully will help inform those judgments. The Workforce Investment Act reauthorization, which is underway now, may also be able to take some steps to institutionalize that.
Great. Yeah, when we were going through this article, I kept asking myself, 80% graduation rates, there's got to be a catch. And I still haven't figured it out, but I do sense that interaction with the local economy has to be at least partially the explanation for it. Let's take some more questions. Let's go this gentleman right here in the middle. Sort of doesn't matter. I'm doing this rather randomly.
Well, thank you for choosing me. Hello, my name is John Anthony Mezza. I'm at Corporate Voices for Working Families. And Jimmy, you mentioned, sort of the stipend potential for somebody. The traditional student today really is the 2/3 of students are working full time and going to community college. I mean, it's impossible. We've seen some great examples of some really nice businesses doing post-secondary education, an earn and learn type of work and model. Do we see the opportunity with some of the business partnerships potentially, James, with looking at being able to help businesses scale that potential and possibility, so we actually see work not only as a barrier, but we see work oftentimes the ability to conceptualize education into the workplace and so forth. And I think that's really a key connection to the labor market, is having businesses actually helping in partnership with community colleges or community-based organizations the education of these folks. Do we see those potential for grant opportunities? We've been looking at a potential convening of community college presidents and local or regional CEOs. So from that perspective, do we see those new type of models being able to be moved forward?
Yeah, I think so. From my perspective, look, I don't think the government has to be the one to provide the leadership here, and particularly as it relates to those stipends, there's a huge role to be paid by employers, both current employers as well as prospective employers. You could see this as a sort of recruitment tool, right, for certain kinds of employers who might be able to want to bring people in with these higher skills level because they're essentially job ready to be able to do the work, and they don't require what often happens in some fields, which is additional training once they get into the position. So this would be an opportunity, I think, for employers to be able to create those kind of stipends. But I think the way to think about this is that there's a whole bunch of tools in the toolbox here, and acceleration is one element. One it's sort of a hammer, not a tape measure in the toolbox, but it's a really important one. But there are also different variants of this acceleration, and you're going to have to focus resources on the unemployed in one way, on working adults in another way, on younger people probably in another way. There's not a sort of a magic elixir here that's going to fix all of the problems in the system with one policy proposal. This just strikes us as one that has some real currency, some immediacy in terms of being able to address an immediate need now, and we think in a very short term could provide some understanding of ways in which you could create even bigger scale that impacts the system much more broadly by learning from this experience. And that's where Stan and I think this is ultimately going, is this has a transformative potential to be able to be a driver of a different way of understanding how we deliver post-secondary education.
Can I add?
If I could, yeah, because I want to hit this point that Jamie just mentioned. I would envision, if we could choose, that in 5 years, that if you went to a community college, that essentially they'd say, you have choices of schedules. You have an 8 to 12 choice, you have a 1 to 5 choice, you have 6 to 9 choice, and that the classes have been chosen for you, and put the counseling effort up front in terms of career counseling, not class scheduling, where most all of the activity goes, and that you would envision that these students could get through in a year or less. There are three things at work. One is, as Carol talked about, they can move at their own pace, and so they actually do get done sooner than the end of the term. Secondly, there's a lot of work being done in terms of taking about 25 to 30% of a course and using technology to deliver that. So it reduces the time you're actually in the seat time, but it's the same kind of learning time. And thirdly is like the tech center, is the intensity. And there's a lot of evidence that the more concentrated the learning, the more successful you're going to be. And so these pieces come together, I think, in highly effective models. And rather than being the one-off or the experiment or the pilot, it really can be the kind of future that we would envision community colleges being like. And, of course, tied to the job market very closely.
I'd just like to add one more thing, which is the involvement of business really is quite important. It's something we can make quite a bit of progress on. The on-the-job training is one of the options for training under the Workforce Investment Act, and there's good statistical evidence that that's pretty effective. Perhaps the most effective type of training under WIA. The apprenticeship programs that the Labor Department runs are similar to what I think you're describing, and those seem to work pretty well. There are some challenges. I think it's hard to do, which is why it's not done more. You want to make sure that ideally, if a government is helping fund the training, you're not training people on a proprietary software system. You're training people toward some sort of skill that is portable. Ideally, it has a credential. Ideally, the credential would be stackable, so you're working your way toward a degree, and that requires businesses to really sit down and think carefully with some of their competitors about what skills do they really need and how do they measure them and how do they assess competency, and that requires looking beyond your quarterly profits a little bit. But it is an area that I think is very promising.
Great. Gentleman right behind you.
Paul Tennessee from the University of District of Columbia. There are two questions. One to Mr. Cavall. Do you foresee or you think it's unthinkable that workers in America must be trained with the possibility that they may have to seek jobs in China, for example? There are reports and analysis in the labor market that Chinese will need a labor force. We've had the migration of American management and technical workers. And the second question to our friends from Tennessee is, considering this as a probability sometime in the future, have you any prospects of training your workers beyond the local market into the global market and doing some kind of skills training in languages also?
I'll just go quickly. I think we're not at a point where we need to start worrying about people needing to move to China. I think there's a lot of good jobs here. There's jobs growth happening here. Wages in China are very, very low. I don't think those jobs are likely to be seen as very appealing to American workers at this point. So I think our focus should be creating good jobs for people here in the U.S.
I will speak from the Technology Center at Murfreesboro. We really have not thought about doing a lot outside of our local area or our state or our region. Right now that's been our concentration just because of a lot of our students, that's their desire to stay within that region. Now we do have students that go outside of the Murfreesboro area to work, but as far as training them to go completely outside, we've not really looked at that yet. So I think that would be safe to say. But it's always a possibility, always a possibility.
Great. Now, let's stack the questions up here. Paul, if you don't mind, going toward the back, and some of our, we've got about 5 guys who've had questions, so if you can find a lady who has a question. I just can't see. It's too dark.
Thanks to the participants today in the panel. Wonderful. My name is Ann Neal with the American Council of Trustees and Alumni. I have been quite excited about your discussion of the prescribed core curriculum and how that helps to advance student success and on-time graduation. The American Council of Trustees and Alumni has been focusing on that in the four-year context, particularly how it helps focus students on the skills and knowledge that they will need rather than the do-it-yourself system that we're seeing at the four-year as well as the two-year area. We have started to ask trustees to look at the limited choice issue as a matter of cost and something in terms of looking at the skyrocketing tuitions. Have you all examined the limited choice not only in terms of student success but also its impact on cost?
Good question. Let's pick up one or two more other questions so that we can get a lot of them in there. Right here, to your left there.
Hi, Bob Lerman, Urban Institute and American University. Hi. Almost all of the elements that you've been talking about are present in a system that we already have called the apprenticeship system. People learn while they earn. They have a full-time wage. The wages are going up through the process of learning. They do take courses. Many of them get associate's degrees as they go through their apprenticeship training. And yet the funding for the Office of Apprenticeship, for anything that tries to do it, is minuscule even compared to community colleges. The budget for the Office of Apprenticeship is about $22 million for the entire nation. And we have 480,000 registered apprentices and probably another several hundred thousand regular apprentices. And it seems like we're always trying to reinvent something here when we already have a very strong system that operates not only very well here, but in other parts of the world that we're not really learning from, countries that are expanding their programs dramatically. And I'm wondering why we don't include that as a key element of matching, learning by doing, learning while earning, and direct business involvement.
Those are really two great questions. Let's open that to the panel. The idea of the core curriculum being a money saver, and why aren't we folding apprenticeships into that? And Carol, there's an element of apprenticeship in what you do. Why don't you maybe address that?
One of the things that we try to do with our students in their last term is to co-op the student or have them work in a business and industry. We also work with several of our industries in Murfreesboro that have apprenticeship programs that help them work through. It is a wonderful system to get people trained and in the workforce and doing what they're going to be doing and understanding it. And it's a wonderful opportunity for the business as well as for the students. So we do try to do that as much as possible. And I was sharing this morning, we're seeing a few of those companies wanting more opportunities for our students to come and co-op so that they'll have, with the economy turning it just a little bit. So that's working out very well for us, and it is a wonderful and very important part of the education system. So I agree with you on that. The limited choice question, I will tell you that our students do much better with having a specific course, knowing exactly what they have to do and get through. And our students generally are on the fast track because they need to get back in the workplace. And so that has really, truly made a difference for our completion rates.
Briefly, in Indiana, I think it started 15 years ago, we now have 5,000 apprentices that are in associate degree programs at the community college. And it's funded by the state and includes many different kinds of electricians, carpenters, plumbers, sheet metal workers, and I think it's probably one of the biggest in the country, and it is supported by this financially by the state as well. Secondly, to Ann's question is that if you look at proprietary schools, they clearly have fewer programs. They pick the high volume programs and they focus on that. They obviously don't do the low volume ones because they're not making those things work. And if you see any distribution, you have huge numbers, like at a community college, huge numbers in nursing, huge numbers in allied health. You add business and computer science, and you probably have close to 5% of all the programs at community colleges. I'm always amazed because that was my former job as Commissioner of Higher Education at the huge numbers of programs at universities, four-year universities that have less than 5 graduates over the last 4 years, and the universities just won't let go of them. And sure, there's a lot of inefficiency in the system, and I'm for choice, but I'm more for directed choice. And just to give you one simple example is if you go to the Purdue catalog and you look at engineering, it'll say here's the recommended freshman course level, here's the recommended sophomore course level, junior and senior if you're going to be in industrial engineering. If you're going to be in history, it says take a bunch of courses from over here, a bunch of courses from over here, a bunch of courses from over here, and somehow they got to add up to 120 credits. There's no plan there. And so I'm a believer not so much in limited choice, but more in directed choice. And if you head students in the right direction, they're likely to follow.
Let's get some more questions. This gentleman right here. Let's try to take a couple. So we've got about 10 more minutes and want to get as many as we can.
Thanks very much. Jeff King, US Euronet. I wanted to ask a little bit about the institutional, maybe Jim can come at this, the institutional supports for the employer role. I mean, Bob's point about apprenticeship is really important, I think, because when you look at how to scale this at national level, I did some work for Education, Labor, and even Tony Carnevale on this. If you look at how to scale this at national level, if you can get about 40% of your firms, large and small firms, to participate at the level of co-creating the curriculum, like the committees that you mentioned, your craft committees, to co-create the curriculum, co-instruct it, co-test and certify it, and co-credential it, then you begin to get to what is national scale, world-class national scale, which is 80 to 90% qualified at the 2-year beyond high school credential level. That's the sort of global consensus level. Every kid needs 2 years beyond high school, plus not just 2 years of courses, but 2 years and some kind of finished, polished, coherent credential. And 80 to 90% total grad. If you add university degrees, 2-year degrees, 4-year degrees, community college degrees, and certificates, if you add all that together at the 2-year beyond high school credential level, the world-class standard is 80 to 90% at national scale. There's about 130, 150 million people who do this and have been doing it for 30 years in about 6 or 8 countries, and you need about 40% of firms doing those 4 institutional things, co-create curriculum, co-instruct, co-test and certify, and co-credential, to co-own the system so that they feel part of it. And there are examples of this in the U.S., and I wondered if, I wanted to ask about those 4 components in terms of institutionalization, but there are examples, for example, 3-year programs where the kid goes in as a senior in high school, gets the high school diploma, then a 2-year community college degree, and a 3-year apprenticeship program where everything is paid. The kid is paid at half a full-time worker's rate. All the tuition is paid all the way through, and they get a state certificate from the Labor Department certifying that they're a master technician and an offer of a $36,000 a year job guarantee when they graduate. Most of those kids take the jobs that they started out with their apprenticeship. They work for the same company. A lot of them are now in 4-year engineering programs.
Sir, excuse me, is there a question there?
Yeah. Is what is the support for institutional at the federal level or any other level? What is the support for the institutional frameworks that will let that kind of scale develop?
Great. Let's grab another question. This gentleman right here.
Brian Cook, the American Council on Education. My question is, what impact, if any, do you think the proposed gainful employment language is going to have on both these short-term programs as well as the ability to get credentials to the 14 million unemployed who need them? Okay,
great. So 2 questions on support for this multifaceted idea of the gentleman and also gainful employment and how it affects the ideas we're talking about.
I'll do those in reverse order. On gainful employment, that's, we're looking at a lot of different approaches. There's been a lot of careful study being done at the department, I'm constrained in what I can say because of the point at which we are in the process, but we're looking at all of those things very carefully. on institutional support, that certainly is one of the hopes of the Community College Initiative. Now, the funding stream that was enacted is only a 4-year funding stream, so that would allow institutions that had a good plan for developing structures like that to stand them up, to evaluate them, to demonstrate their effectiveness. But the ongoing funding for sustaining those is a problem for another day, I guess. But hopefully they'll be able to demonstrate some effectiveness there, and I think programs like the one you described would be ones that we could try out.
Great. Let's try to, unless anyone else has okay. Right here in the middle row there.
Hi, I'm Laura Donnelly-Smith from the Association of American Colleges and Universities. I'm curious what the panelists would say to the argument that students need and deserve a broad-based education that focuses on critical thinking and integrative learning skills that will make them adaptable when the next recession comes along, when industry evolves again, an education that won't require more retraining sometime down the road.
Great question. Let's try to grab a couple more here. A couple rows back.
Janet Hansen from the Committee for Economic Development. I'm intrigued that in Tennessee, Carol, you have both your technical colleges and community colleges, which I think is a little bit of an unusual structure. And we're all friends and off the record here. I'm curious to know whether the community colleges in Tennessee have adopted in any part the model that you found so successful, at least in their technical programs, and if not, what you think the barriers have been to doing that.
Great. And one more. Paul, use your immense discretion to find...
David Moltz from Inside Higher Ed. I'm curious, a lot of the talk about scalability seems to belie the bifurcated mission that a lot of these states have. So piggybacking on the last question, there are about a handful of states that do have two systems, one for technical and one for community colleges. I talk to a lot of academics who can't think in languages besides seat time and credit hour and semester. It seems a little presumptuous that we would be able to sort of push funds to one is without, frankly, upsetting the other. I'm sort of wondering, there's probably going to be a push and pull as for these federal funds. How do you sort of reconcile is what is an extremely bifurcated mission that is kind of angsty in a lot of states? As many states, community colleges, they have the transfer side, which they perceive as being the new mission, and they have the workforce side, which is considered old-fashioned and vocational.
Great questions. Jamie, you want to?
Yeah, I want to take the question about ability to think critically and analyze problems, and that actually in the same vein. I think that, look, the model of higher education in our country is evolving, and we can see it with what we're seeing now in the for-profit sector. We're seeing it with the innovation that's taking place in competency-based models like Western Governors University and lots of other examples. So the model is changing, and you can see in the regs, the proposed regs the administration just put forward, that there is this push and pull, right, between the traditional definitions of academic progress and then the so-called exceptions. And I think over time, those exceptions are not really going to be exceptions. They're going to be what's driving the system, because it's pretty clear that despite what you see, which I think is accurate in the field, that this seat time, credit hour based approach is what many people are comfortable with. That model is going to continue to evolve. We see more and more emphasis from organizations like AAC&U about an emphasis on learning and measuring learning as the key outcome of higher education. If you move towards a more learning-focused system, it's pretty clear that how much time you spend on doing that is going to be less and less important. And I think the Tennessee Tech Centers and others are examples of that it is about the acquisition of learning and knowledge that's really important. And I think it gets back to the question that was asked earlier about what about the being able to have these broad-based skills. I couldn't agree more that, in fact, in order to be able to be successful in our economy, you've got to be able to think critically and solve problems and communicate. And the best of these programs should be able to give you those skills. The point is that in many programs right now, we tend to see these as sort of additional general education requirements you might have instead of embedded in what you should be learning. as part of the core program in these institutions. So whether it's a certificate or associate or a bachelor's or beyond, this idea of being able to emphasize the broad-based skills as well as the content knowledge, the generalizable abilities as well as the specific experiences is going to be very important. And it doesn't matter what the credential is, whether it's a certificate in advanced manufacturing, or whether it's a bachelor's degree or beyond in humanities or the social sciences. You should be able to get both content and generalizable skills out of that education, and that's where I think the system's going.
Just to answer two things. One is that I think the system's broke. And so whether you're going for an associate degree program in liberal arts, you don't graduate from those either. 30% of those students may graduate. A third of those students don't go on for the second 2 years. Of the ones that go on, maybe 40% of those graduate. So they're no more effective. I mean, you can't learn if you're not progressing. I think Jamie's answer was really the best in terms of an integrated curriculum. But I want to point out that if you're not in the tracking, it doesn't mean you're going to be successful otherwise. Secondly, in Tennessee, you're right, and somebody had asked this question earlier. Tennessee is probably the biggest example where the certificate programs are broadly offered by tech centers. There's maybe another half a dozen states that do it, but they're much smaller basis. But what's happened in Tennessee, as a result of a special session in Tennessee, the legislature, with the governor's urging, adopted legislation to introduce these accelerated programs on the community college campuses that require block scheduling, cohort-based, a much higher degree of completion. And I sat down with him and handed out a piece of paper, one piece of paper. They said he doesn't read memos, even though he's a Harvard graduate. So I just put one piece of paper in front of him, and one side was the graduation rates for the tech centers, one side was the graduation rates for the community centers, for the community colleges, and he said, "You have my attention. Tell me why this works and this doesn't." And he said, "This is what we're going to do." And I will tell you that when a lot of us went into the state, we didn't know those things. We learned those things, and so it's a way of just envisioning the future differently.
Since we're talking about Tennessee, I really feel like I should make some comments. As far as with the community colleges and the technology centers, we do have some partnerships. We work together on articulation whenever we can. We try to promote each other's programs. We have a good relationship working together. So I want to share that. The other thing, as far as the critical thinking skills, we work with our students not only on just the skills, but also the theory-based of their study. So they have got to be able to think critically as they go out into the workforce. That's just a given. One of the nicest things the students ever said to me was, "You really taught me to learn again." And to me that was really neat, because they thought they had forgotten how to do that. And so that's really neat. So we do address all those areas, as well as work with worker characteristics and ethics skills on our students when they leave. They actually take 3 grades with them: a theory, a skill, and a worker characteristic grade, to take those to the workplace. So we work well with that, and we're working on articulation at the community college, which I think, thanks to Stan and his group, with the governor, that's going to happen more. We want our students to go on. We want them to do what they need to further themselves. But the reality is a lot of our students have given up a year to a year and a half, and they've got to get in the workforce and make some money. So that's what we're trying to do.
James, anything? Okay, well, I'm going to leave it there, folks. I'm immensely grateful to Jamie and Stan for bringing us this great article. You don't get articles, ideas that seem as practical and of the moment that often. I want to also thank Jamie and the Lumina Foundation for their support for our higher education coverage and for New America's education work here. And James, thanks for taking the time out, and also Carol. Thank you, everybody.